Good morning, welcome to RV Squared. I'm Steve Vance. Today I'm going to talk to you about preventative maintenance, and there's been a lot of conversation as to what the actual procedures are to come in and check on your coach every couple weeks. That's a bi-weekly check, or bi-monthly if you will, and while it varies from rig to rig and manufacturer to manufacturer, the basics are still the same. So today I'm going to walk through the procedures that I go through on, in this case, a Class A coach made by Newell. So stick around. So to give you a little background of where I get my experience and philosophy on routine maintenance, when I was growing up, my best friend had large boats, and so I was constantly with him as he did routine maintenance, battery checks, generator checks, engine checks, etc. And while the differences between a boat and an RV are a little obvious, there are a lot of similarities. The other thing is once I got into the fire service, that routine maintenance became ingrained in our daily lives. Every day we did daily checks. Every week we did weekly checks, and we had monthly checks, we had 6-month checks, and then we had annual preventative maintenance, which was an exhaustive overall service. But the procedures, aside from the differences between a fire truck and a Class A diesel pusher, are obviously different. There are many similarities. The engines are the same, the generators are the same, the batteries are the same. So a lot of the procedures that I do for our Class A coach are identical to what I did on fire trucks. So I'm going to turn the camera around and I'm going to let you see kind of through my eyes what I look at when I come to our storage facility. Now, one of the things I want to tell you is, unfortunately, we don't have 50 amp service here. So I have to have my coach plugged into 110, and that comes with some certain risks, and I will kind of walk you through what I do to overcome those risks. One of the problems is when you're plugged into 110 outside on a lot of these facilities like here, there are outside outlets protected by GFI or GFCI outlets, and those are super sensitive to any type of resistance problems. And a resistance problem in the electricity world means that you could have a short or perhaps a shock hazard. So when these things pop and trip, you're out of power. So let me walk you through a couple things that I do to try to overcome that problem. First off, this is an outlet that's outside. It has a cover. These covers do an okay job at sealing out the moisture and the dust, but a lot of these times people will put in these large plugs and it'll keep that box open, which does no good to keep the dust out. You can see even here with these outlets and these ports down below, you still get a lot of dust up in here. If that dust finds its way into these receptacle prongs, you got a problem with resistance, and then it'll pop that breaker. So this has got a green light, which is good. That means it's still energized. One of the things I do to overcome the problem of this box not being able to be closed is I buy these little pigtails. It's a real simple, small pigtail, got on Amazon. It's a 90-degree plug, and it does wonders because it keeps that plug flat and it allows that box to be closed. And then I plug in my extension cord and I give it a good wrap with good high quality electrical tape. I even go so far as to coat this with UV protectant so that it keeps that cord nice and pliable. It keeps all the sun UV damage from getting to this insulation. So next, once I get the door up, I take a look at the coach from the back end. Now, I keep my leveling system turned off. That means that if I have a slight air leak or a valve leak or an airbag leak, I'm going to detect it by looking at my coach and see that it's leaning from one side to the other. So a quick visual lets you know I'm in good shape, coach is perfectly level, and then I just proceed onward. Now, I keep my extension cords plugged in, 2 separate spots. They're lit extension cords. So I have a Y adapter, which lets me bifurcate my plug that comes into the bay into 2 places. I send one to the onboard chassis charger. I send the other one to the Victron BlueSmart charger. This BlueSmart charger is really awesome. I like it. It's a float charger and it has a Bluetooth iOS app, which is great because then I can come in here and I can see the current status. But what's really great is I can look at the history. So one of the great things about this charger is being able to see when it is float charging. And these dark blue lines, that's my float. And that's really important to me because I can tell the health of my charging and battery system for the house batteries. And I like to see a good long float on each charge cycle. That tells me that my batteries are topped off, they're healthy, I'm not drawing a lot of current coming into my coach. And right now I don't really have anything turned on. No refrigerator, no appliances, no heaters, no nothing. So these batteries are being float charged every day. This charger is barely working. It's a 30 amp charger and it's just awesome. From the charger, I connect it using this Anderson plug, and it's a really cool bidirectional plug, and it's polarized so you can't make a mistake. It has a little dust boot on it that when I'm traveling I put that dust boot across, so just like that, it stays right there. It's an Anderson SB50 plug. It works great and it stays out of the way. It's connected to my house batteries and just makes a real fast, easy way to connect my house batteries. So that's the Victron BlueSmart charger. So I come in from the outside plug, I come in here to a Y adapter. One plug goes to my Victron, which goes to my house batteries. The other plug goes to my chassis charger back here. I use a Nest camera that points right down at those lights. So even at night, when I'm at home, I can log in and check my camera and I can see that both of my plugs are energized, and it works great. The other thing that's great about that Nest camera is it will send an alert if I ever lose power to that camera, which means that I've lost power to my bay, which means I've got a problem. So another thing to do is when you come to your coach, before you move it out, take a look under the motor, look under the coach, all the way down towards the wet bay. Now's the time to see a leak on the ground when you can pinpoint where the leak is coming from. If you take and move your coach, you're going to lose that reference point of where that leak came from. So before you move the coach, check for leaks on the ground. So once I get myself detached, I come in and I'm going to listen to my air door as it comes open. Now when you come up to the rig and open your air door, you're probably going to hear one of these compressors kick on to recharge the air system. But I like to every month just do a changeover on my compressor switch. This is going to determine which compressor is currently working. So right now my right compressor is working. I had it on the left compressor, and so I'll just come in here every month and give it a quick flip of the switch. Your hour meters up here will give you an idea of how long each compressor has been working. But if you just transfer this over every month, then it keeps the compressors working equally. One of the big things about working anything is routine exercise is the key to keeping these things working, keeping the seals lubricated, keeping the compressor, keeping the generator, keeping the motors, whatever it is. If you keep them exercised, you're going to have less problems than if you just let them sit forever without working. And remember, as you're walking around checking things out, listen for that compressor. If you hear that compressor exercising every 5 minutes or something like that, you've probably got an air leak somewhere, and these things will obviously generate air leaks over time. But that compressor shouldn't be coming on every 5 or 10 minutes. We're pretty good. Our compressor, I don't think, comes on when the airbag and leveling system is turned off. I don't know that our compressor kicks on maybe every 20 to 30 minutes at the most. So if you're not opening the doors and you're not leveling your coach, your compressor should not be coming on very often at all. Give your tires a quick look. It's going to be very hard to see a tire that's underinflated unless it's grossly underinflated, but you definitely want to give them a check before you move your coach. In terms of air pressure, this is a really good spot to check your air pressure from the outside of the coach before you even get inside. So I've got 120 pounds of residual air. It's going through the regulator right here, and it's regulated down to I'm at about 45 pounds regulated air out of this outlet right here. With this air doubler system, if you do this, it takes that tank pressure of about 120 and runs it all the way up to, we're pushing close to 160. And that's what you need to fill these big high pressure tires, whether it's your coach tires or maybe a bicycle tire that's high pressure. Another thing to check while you're out here, don't forget your fire extinguisher. At the minimum, check that gauge to make sure you're still in the green, you're charged up. And it's also a good idea to pull this extinguisher out every now and again and give that thing a shake and check to make sure you got the content in there. So here's another little trick for you. When your coach is in the dark bay, take advantage of that darkness and throw on all your lights. Put your floodlights on, put your docking lights on, put your flashers on, which will give you an opportunity to see your turn signals in your mirror. You'll see your turn signals up front. You'll see your daytime running lights, your headlights. Check your marker lights up top. Great time to check all those when it's dark, because when it's outside in the light, it's really hard to see these individual LEDs in here. But when it's dark, you'll be able to see them perfectly. Alexa, lights on. Now with everything on in terms of lights, and my rig is unplugged, my chargers are unplugged, I like to come in and I check my electric panel on my silver leaf display. I check my AC and my DC power, I check the amperage, and I check the DC voltage to see where my batteries are at when I'm off charge. So let's take a look at that now. So obviously my AC power should say 0 amps. I'm really not pulling any amps whatsoever through the inverter. My DC, I'm sitting at 12.6 volts, that's great. And once again, 0 amps are going into the inverter, and that's great, despite all my lights being on in the coach, and that's what I want to see. Having the Rosie gateway installed on my Silverleaf panel really helps things out. I can monitor my coach anywhere I have internet connection, from the status of the inverters to the batteries. I can even set my generator and climate control remotely, which really makes it handy. I can check my status of my whole system, including the actual temperature in the bays. So I love having that. Now some of the lights that are halogen based or incandescent, like the actual sconce lights, they're 110, and those lights will pull a little bit more energy. So if we turn on my sconce lights and we go to this panel, that panel is now showing 21 amps going through the inverter. That's the equivalent of 2 amps at 110. Remember, you have to divide the DC by roughly 10, or in this case you're going to multiply the AC by 10. So 2 amps of 110 power, which is AC, is about equivalent to 20 amps of 12 volt power. That's crude, rough math too, by the way. It's always nice to put water in your traps to make sure that if you have water in the bottom of your trap, that keeps the gases from leaking up into your coach. And I'll do that throughout the coach. I'll run the bathroom sink, I'll put water in the shower. Sometimes if it's been a while and I haven't run the washer, I'll go ahead and run the washer temporarily. It's up to you. You don't have to. And I also flush the toilets too. Now when you come in and kick your accessories on before you start your rig, you'll notice that your front and rear air tanks are most likely low, and that's perfectly fine. They don't hold their pressure forever. However, the auxiliary tank needs to. The auxiliary tank is supplied by the compressor that you just heard turn off. That keeps your air seals filled, okay, for the slides. It also keeps your rig leveled, and that's why I like to keep my rig leveling system turned off, right? Because that lets you determine whether or not you have a leak in your system. If you left your leveling system on auto or on travel when you're stored, it's going to constantly try to keep the rig level. If you want to check it now, all you got to do is press the travel mode or the auto mode, and you'll hear the rig start to try to level itself. Now, as soon as I turn travel mode on, you'll hear the compressor turn on, and you're going to see my auxiliary air tank drop. That's perfectly normal because right now it's inflating my airbags to bring me up to travel height. Once that chirps and stops blinking, I know I'm in travel height. I want to point out that the way the air pressure system works on parking brakes is it uses air pressure to pull the actual brake calipers away from your discs, and that means that if you have an air leak or you lose pressure, that your brakes are applied. That's a safety system. You'll notice right now that there's hardly any pressure on this parking brake. That's because I'm so low in air pressure. Once your air pressure drops down, usually the cutoff is 30 pounds, this pops out and it will not be able to go back in. I checked my chassis and my house batteries. In this case, they're 12.3 and 12.5, which is what my panel says, so I know that's good. Then I'll jump over to the other drive screen and I'll check my air pressures. And if I've got enough air pressure, I'm kind of almost to 30, but I might just do a pump brake test and I'll basically apply my brake and I will watch to see if these numbers drift down. You want to do this without the engine running. If you do it with the engine running, then the compressor on the engine is just going to compensate for that air loss. And I'm just going to hold the brakes down like I am doing right now, and I'm going to watch for about 30 to 45 seconds to see if any of these numbers drop down. You want to see them stay fixed. If they start drifting and losing air pressure, then you know you've got a system leak somewhere. But now that that's good, I'm going to go ahead and kick the rig up. I'm going to wait till my oil pressure comes up a bit before I go into high idle. There are two high idle settings. There's a low and a high idle. So you turn your cruise control on. If you hit the set button, you'll notice I'll go to a high idle. And that's set right at about 850, 860. If I want a faster high idle, I can hit the resume, and that jumps all the way up to 1500. Normally you don't need it that high to start with, especially if the engine's cold. So what you're looking for is to air build up in the front and the rear. The auxiliary is going to stay about the same, but all these are going to kind of top out at 110. So at this point you can put it in travel mode and back your rig out and let it idle for a while. And if you need to, start up your generator. And I run my generator at the minimum every month. And some people will go a little bit more than that. Some people will go a lot longer than that, which I don't particularly recommend. I recommend that if you can't run it every 2 weeks, to at least run it every month. When I do, I'll pull the coach out and I'll fire the generator up, let it sit for a little bit, and let it switch over to the 110 and the 240 supply. And then I'll power up all my air conditioners. I like to run my washer and even my dryer, and I'll run that for probably 30 or 40 minutes and let it get a good workout. It's good for your air conditioners to run every month. It's good for your generator to run, keeps it warmed up, dried up, keeps the fluids moving through there. I'll check for leaks that way, and it's just a good way to go. And of course, I'll let the rig run for about 30 minutes as well too. And I'll check all my fluids. I'll check my oil, the trans, I'll look at my radiator fluid. I'll even check my aqua hot fluid, which the reservoir is in the back of the engine bay. But as far as the bi-weekly, bi-monthly check, that's all there is to it. It shouldn't take you more than about a half hour. And on the monthly check, it's going to take you probably set aside 2 hours, because once the generator's running and everything's warmed up, you want to run the slides. And taking the slides in and out at least every month, but best to do it every 2 weeks, will help keep those slide seals pliable and keep everything moving. Because once again, the worst thing for these coaches is to let them sit. You don't want the tires to sit in one spot for a long time, because the molecules in that rubber are kept activated and pliable if they're constantly being moved and the stresses on that tire are constantly changing. That's the reason why truckers can get so much mileage off of their tires long before they age out. Whereas an RV that's sitting all the time, your tires age out long before they have too many miles put on them. It's because the RVs will typically just sit way too long. And so the pressure just sitting on that one spot of that tire, that rubber just becomes stiffened. So as they say, use it or lose it. And that's kind of the name of the game here. So you can't go wrong by overusing the features, mechanics, electronics on the coach. Just keep using it, and that's the secret to success. Get your own routine and just get in the habit of doing this, and it'll become muscle memory after a while. It just becomes all automatic. It's actually kind of harder for me to make this video and talk about it than it is for me just to do it, because it's just kind of automatic for me. Alexa, light master off.
Okay.
So there we go. That's all set. All right, I hope you guys got something out of that. It's how I go through it, and it's the cursory bi-weekly, bi-monthly check, and you can add to that on your monthly checks, and then on a 6-month check, add to that. You know, if you want to put your slides out every couple weeks, all the more power to you. Can't hurt anything. So that's all there is. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate your comments. Make sure to give me some more feedback, and hit the like and subscribe for more. Thanks, and have a great day.